Breaking news from the Ibex Outdoor News Desk. This just in, REI has been acquired by Bass Pro Shops. Staff have been informed to surrender their signature green vests in exchange for new Blaze orange uniforms. Additionally, the company will be rebranding its historic opt-outside event as Open Season. All right, maybe that's not true, but you know what is? Ibex Outdoor Clothing. They make the best wool apparel on the market, from everyday essentials like the goat tee to expedition pieces like the mammoth hoodie. Ibex has premium merino layers ready to fully outfit any customer. As a privately held brand run by a team of end users, Ibex does things differently with a focus on heritage, no bullshit sustainability, and premium performance. Ibex is what you reach for when you want the best. Schedule some time to see the Ibex team at GOA Connect in Kansas City this November and see why Ibex is the perfect choice for specialty retail shops. And hey, you want to see more today? Head to ibex.com. Welcome to the Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin True, and today we're pulling back the curtain on the newest media venture to hit the outdoors as we take a look at Republic with Chris Keyes. But first, some programming reminders. Be sure to come back to the Rock Fight on Monday for your healthy dose of industry scoop with myself and producer Dave and the outdoor industry insider Owen Comerford. On Tuesday, Doug Schnitzbahn opens the container like he always does. His guest this week, Jordan Campbell. It's an exciting conversation. You don't want to miss that. Next Thursday, head over to the Gear Abbey feed for the 4th episode of Gear Abbey to come out. Host Shantae Salabert will be breaking it all down. You don't want to miss that. And, of course, follow us here on The Rock Fight. Follow on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. Subscribe to News from the Front, our weekly newsletter, by heading to rockfight.co. And send your emails to myrockfight@gmail.com. All right, let's get into today's episode. And to start, I'm going to post up on Old Guy Corner here for a second as I introduce the topic and the guest for the day. As I've talked about a whole bunch on this podcast, I started my outdoorsy journey in the mid to late 90s, which means that most of my formative outdoor years were spent reading turn-of-the-century copies of Outside Magazine. I'm talking about the days of Lance Armstrong and Laird Hamilton and the top outdoor towns and just tons of Everest coverage. Not that Everest coverage has really diminished at all, but there was a lot of it back then too. And those days also meant that each issue of Outside Magazine came with an editor's note from Chris Keyes. And my memory of those days was that Outside was the top outdoor magazine that you had to subscribe to, and that Keyes was the guy that made it happen. I mean, I know the editor-in-chief of a magazine doesn't do it all, but the face that you saw on the inside of each issue was Chris Keyes, which makes Outside's heyday inextricably linked to him. Chris stayed with Outside until this past spring when he was part of one of Outside's recent rounds of layoffs, and until this point, he and I hadn't spoken ever, even though I'm sure our paths crossed more than we'd ever know. And that is until Chris reached out to me to chat this past spring about the new venture he was starting, and one that is pretty damn timely. So just this week, Chris launched Republic. And per Republic's newly launched website, Republic is a, quote, nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom dedicated solely to covering the policies, people, and forces shaping the future of America's public lands, end quote. And like we've talked about on this show with Paul Hendricks from the Conservation Alliance and with Tanya and Adam from the Outdoor Alliance, public lands are, the places we all go to do all the outdoor stuff that our industry enables us to do with all the stuff that we make. Well, they're having a tough time right now, thanks to our lovely presidential administration. But as Chris explained to me when we spoke, public lands deserve this kind of attention no matter who's sitting in the White House. And he explained that to me in the conversation you're about to hear. So let's get into it. Welcome back to the Rock Fight, where today it's the launch of Republic with Chris Keyes, and that's coming up right after a few words from our sponsors. Just in time for fall, we're happy to introduce a new sponsor to the Rock Fight, Fjallraven, because you can't fjall without Fjallraven. And there's crickets on the other Zooms. All right, fall.
Okay.
Fall doesn't get nearly enough credit for hiking, guys. Everyone thinks summer's the season, but for hikers, autumn is the real deal. Cooler days, quieter trails, more space, and fall is exactly what Fjallraven's Keb collection is built for. Born from trekking in northern Sweden, their jackets, fleeces, trousers let you focus on nature, all specifically designed to make cold optional. So check out the whole Keb collection by clicking on the link in the show notes or search for it when you head to fjallraven.com, where your fall begins.
I'm excited about having this as a new sponsor here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
you are on the record.
Exactly.
You should be very excited actually about this.
Yeah. I think there should be some samples coming my way. Is what I think.
That's right.
Let's do that again. Just in time for fall, we're happy to introduce Owen's new closet.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
All right, the main event on today's episode of The Rock Fight is presented by Lem's Shoes. As the summer season wraps up, now's a great time to get ready for fall with Lem's. From easygoing slip-ons and refined leather lace-ups to tough, trail-ready boots, Lem's offers footwear for every occasion, and their fit is unmatched. If you've never experienced the fit of a pair of Lem's, hey man, I just feel sorry for you. Built with comfort, durability, and versatility at the core, their collection is ready to take you wherever the season leads, and with fresh, exciting styles just around the corner. Be sure to stay tuned, but in the meantime, head to lemshoes.com right now to get your feet into the best fitting shoe you've ever worn. And apparently, you can go to Town to Trail Outfitters in Brighton, Michigan to get your Lems pretty soon, if not already. So
that's right.
All right, guys, pop quiz. What animals kill the most humans every year?
Rhinoceros. No. Buffalo.
It is Yellowstone tourist petting bison.
That's right. They're a killer in the national park system.
Owen, you got a guess?
It's cats, because just out of pure boredom.
Dave's lived this long. Guys, no, it's mosquitoes. That's an actual true thing. They kill more humans every year, right? And like the Dalai Lama once said, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. But I doubt the Dalai Lama was sleeping in an Amp Light long sleeve shirt from Royal Robbins, because the Amp Light long sleeve, like everything in Royal's MPT collection, has mosquito protection technology. Relying on protection through construction, MPT is the chemical-free solution to mosquito-free days in the outdoors. So to shop the entire MPT collection from Royal Robbins and stay bite-free in these waning days of summer, head to royalrobbins.com. All right, everyone, we are here today with Chris Keyes, the founder of the new outdoor media nonprofit that will be focused on topics and issues surrounding our public lands called Republic. Welcome to the show, Chris. Keyes, not Keys. I'm going to just go ahead and for people who don't know, let's just say it publicly. It's Keyes, not Keys.
I really appreciate that I didn't have to say eyes with a K.
It's been your whole life, right?
It's been my whole life. Yeah. I'm fighting an uphill battle. There was a politician named Alan Keyes who ran for president, and it kind of just destroyed our name forever.
Probably, I've endured it maybe a little bit better than you, because it's the instinct to say Keyes, but Colin Powell was a bit of a setback for Collins everywhere.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Spelled it correctly, pronounced it incorrectly. I don't know what his parents did to that poor guy.
That's a really good point. Colon, yeah. Where did that come from?
All right, well, let's start just with the big question. I don't want to keep anyone waiting. This episode's coming out on Friday the 12th. And earlier this week, you launched Republic. It's out there now. We've been talking about it for a few weeks behind the scenes, but now it's a real deal. What is Republic?
Yeah, well, the short answer is, and you kind of defined it there at the top, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom, and we're dedicated exclusively to covering, the policies and the forces shaping America's public lands. And the longer answer is that it's the big career turn for me after 25 years in journalism. This is kind of a passion project for me that I'm just getting off the ground.
So a lot of people would know you from your time as editor-in-chief at Outside Magazine. That was my history with you before we had, actual history together. But when you look back on that time, you chose public lands that you want to focus on for your next step, not, tracking Killian Jornet, ripping off 14ers in Colorado and California. So what is it about the public lands that interested you primarily?
I think when I look back at my career, which was mostly at Outside, I think of myself as sort of working at the intersection of public lands and journalism. And, the outdoor industry is much broader than just public lands, but it's completely dependent on these lands and access to these lands. And when I left Outside, I actually took a beat and really thought about whether I wanted to get back into media, because it's been 25 years of disruption and contraction, and it's been a rough space. There have been a lot of signs, Colin, that I chose a bad career choice. But I can't help myself. I love journalism. I love storytelling. And so it's Brokeback Mountain. I just can't quit you, journalism. And I was really fascinated by the nonprofit business model. Maybe that's the 25 years of being abused by the for-profit model, but there's something really intriguing about the independence that you can have in a nonprofit model. And when I thought about the issue that I would most be passionate about covering, it was public lands. I know that from my time at Outside, coverage of public lands, particularly in the first Trump administration, when you're talking about issues like Standing Rock and Bears Ears, and those are some of our most popular stories. So I know that there's a real audience for it. And I like the idea of sort of the back half of my career. I'm 51, so I can start talking about the back half of my career. I'm an old. I like putting it towards something I'm incredibly passionate about. And so you mash up public lands and journalism, and those are my two loves. So that's why I started it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to consider like your role over the last, and being informed by all of the changes in media. I mean, to your point, you started at sort of like probably a golden age in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, and then having to live through the 2010s. And then to your point, kind of going back to the well again. But also, with informing that, I mean, just not even outdoor media, but like media in general. I mean, there's been so much upheaval. And honestly, we've talked a bunch about in this podcast about how it seems that the individual voices, like podcasts, Substacks, whatever it is, probably more of the future. Why did you decide then, instead of just kind of like maybe leaning into it yourself, or sort of like, hey, here's the Kai's blog or whatever you want to call it about public lands, why do you think we need sort of a whole organization that's dedicated to nothing but news and stories about public lands?
Well, primarily it's just because of the incredible contraction that we've seen in media. I cite this statistic all the time, but I think there are 75% fewer journalists than we had 2 decades ago. That's an
journalists, like individuals,
just individual journalists. Yeah.
Wow.
And now most of that's on the local level with the decline of newspapers. But it's industry wide. And at the same time, I think public lands issues are going to be with us for decades and decades. But right now, there are unprecedented levels of threats to our public lands coming out of this administration. And you have a media ecosystem that is completely overwhelmed by the pace of change and the number of things being proposed. And from a national perspective and national media perspective, public lands are kind of number 19 on the list of topics that they're trying to stay on top of. And so I'm really seeing, while there is great coverage out there, there's 3 journalists who started a Substack called Public Domain, and I'm a real fan of what the work they're doing. High Country News has always been in this space and does a great job covering public lands, but I will argue till I'm blue in the face with anybody that we do not have enough journalists covering this space. And so I am trying to stand up a news organization that is solely covering this. And you ask why do we need an organization covering this solely? I'll give an example of my time at Outside. Even knowing how popular public lands coverage was, because we had a broad mandate to cover the outdoors writ large, if I had 3 great killer assignments on public lands and then I got a 4th one, I might say, hey, this is a great story, but we've already flooded the zone with 3 public land stories, and we're going to pass on this one this time. By just being exclusively on this topic, I won't have to turn those kinds of stories away, and I think there's something almost liberating about being solely focused on one topic. It just forces you to make this. It's helpful to know what we're not covering as much as it is what we are covering.
What can readers expect? Because it's a really interesting point about 75% fewer journalists. I kind of wonder how that plays out going forward, especially when a lot of the content of the last 10 years or so in the outdoor space anyway was the listicle style stuff, which now, love it or hate it, honestly, ChatGPT could write a listicle as good as anybody probably, right? It's like evaluate these 6 things and rank them, and it'll probably read a lot like you would have seen something in Outside magazine not that long ago.
Fair, yep.
Right. I mean, no disrespect to anybody at Outside, but it's just sort of like that's kind of the world we're in now, and as it's evolving. So how are you going to position Republic to be different? Like, what kind of work can readers expect from Republic?
So those who know me and have worked with me for a long time know, like, I am a diehard supporter of long form literary journalism, and it's my core competency. It's what I'm passionate about. It's the kind of storytelling that I know has the most impact out there. So our first year is really focused on commissioning 10 to 12 investigative pieces that are going to have high impact out there, and not necessarily covering public lands on the daily drip of news that's coming out of there, but really focusing on these long lead time, big impact stories that we're going to partner with existing organizations like a High Country News to co-publish and reach as broad an audience as we can. So that's the focus of year one. We also want to grow into being a news entity that can cover on the daily. But that's in order to get this thing off the ground and be as lean as possible. We're just going to be starting off focusing on a newsletter, eventually a podcast, but really on those big investigative pieces.
Why'd you choose the nonprofit route?
Because I spent 25 years in for-profit media, and it was. I mean, I'm laughing.
You don't want to be chasing that Toyota ad or whatever for the public lands kind of thing.
I'm laughing, but you can only laugh. I mean, it's been a tough ride. I've had to lay off quite a few people in my career, and if that's ever easy, you better look yourself in the mirror, because
no kidding.
It's a tough place to be. And I think so much of it is because the media has become completely dependent on advertising. And so whether the entity is doing well or not, really, it depends on where's the ad market. And now that the ad market's been splintered into 1,000 different places that you can advertise, it's just much harder to capture those dollars. So why a nonprofit? One of the bright spots in media these days is nonprofit media. There's more than 500 news organizations now that are nonprofit underneath this umbrella organization called the Institute for Nonprofit News. And not all of them are thriving, but a lot of them have carved out like a really sustainable business model in the space, through a combination of foundation support, individual donors, and then their readership. And that's really attractive to me. I mean, I've traded ad sales for foundation sales, essentially. But I like the idea that I will be responsible for bringing in the revenue, and that I will never feel the way I do with some commercial advertisers, where there's a transactional exchange there, and there's an expectation among the advertisers of what they're going to get and what you're maybe not going to cover. We'll put it that way.
All right, let's take a break right now and hear from our sponsors. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think you're spot on. It'll be interesting.
You got to make money, so I'm all for it. Right. Have a sponsor.
Don't listen to Kai's. All right, we need your ad dollars here in the Rock Fight. No, but I think you're right. At some point, everybody you have to cross that bridge, and like, how do you balance that out? And then also, I think it'll be interesting to see. A lot of things will be interesting to see. Hopefully we survive, the Trump administration and how things shake out afterwards, and the attack on PBS and all that that's happened over the last few months. Like what happens in media in the coming, years and decades should definitely be interesting to track. And I think this will be something hopefully that rises to the fore.
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, I think the pitch I make out there to potential funders is, there's two main ways to have an impact on the conservation world. You can fund like specific programs that are designed to protect these acres in the Oregon high desert, say, or you can fund public education, and that's essentially what we are. And I think, to preserve for the long run the value of these public lands, you need an educated public. You need an agitated and animated public that is aware of the issues and armed with information about the challenges that we face and about the importance of these public lands. And without a strong media and with strong journalism out there, that's not possible. So we are not going to be an advocacy organization fighting to protect a specific area of land, but we are going to be fighting to keep people aware of all the decisions that are being made, so that if they decide that that's an important enough place for them to want to save, that they get involved, whether with an advocacy group or just simply, writing to their congressman.
So it's probably easy to look at, well, to hear what you're talking about now, and if you're at all involved in the outdoor industry or as an outdoor enthusiast or whatever, kind of immediately see the need for that, given what we've endured in the first few months of the second Trump term. Looking beyond that, again, if we kind of come out of this clean somehow, how do you expect in peacetime, how do you expect what's the role of Republic in more of a normal day-to-day that we're not dealing with just overt attacks on our public lands? I imagine there's going to be a lot of focus on what's happening right now as you kind of get things going. Looking beyond that, what's the kind of content you hope to be doing down the road?
Well, I'm pretty realistic in thinking like, yes, we are facing more challenges under this current administration, but to say that there weren't threats to our public lands under the Biden administration or the Obama administration would be, naive to the greatest degree. So, to a certain degree, we are always going to be playing defense in the conservation movement. And the agencies that are in charge of these lands, they have a broad mandate. They need to balance recreation, conservation, and the extractive industries, and that's always going to be part of their mandate. So, again, it comes back to awareness and covering those stories. Now, I think that if you just think about preserving and conserving public lands, like public lands issues are so much broader than that. You can think about issues of access and who gets to recreate on public lands. You can talk about, issues of policing and the police work that's done on public lands. And sometimes that gets pretty dicey, and that's a really important topic going forward. So I think that, broadly speaking, I'm not concerned with 630 million acres to cover, that there aren't going to be compelling stories even when the threats aren't quite as dire as they are now.
I guess one of the last big things I really want to talk about, we can kind of get into, the kind of the nitty gritty of the site itself and what readers should do or potential readers should do. But a lot of what we talk about here in the Rock Fight is obviously focused on the business of going outside, right? We talk a lot about, the making of stuff and the distribution of stuff. If you were advising brands or retailers, how to engage with conversations around our public lands, like what would you say to them? Like what would you want, those folks who kind of fuel the outdoor economy in a lot of ways, especially in the human powered space? I often refer to our brands as they're our celebrities, right? It's like people care about what our outdoor brands do, whether you go outside or not. You probably own some of their stuff and have it in your closet. So what's the role you would like to see the industry play as we look at these, more conservation driven topics and public lands in general?
Well, by and large, I think the industry's really used their voice effectively, particularly in the first Trump administration, fighting things like the either downsizing or elimination of bears ears. You had a lot of brands coming out in favor of protecting these national monuments. I would say, and this is anecdotal, but just watching from the outside, that brands have not been as brave with using their voices this time around, and they're a little afraid to put themselves out there. And if I were to talk to those brands, I would say there's really very little downside to being vocal about this issue, because it's one of the few bipartisan issues that we have left. Yes, there's always going to be, brands, especially large brands, are afraid of angering anybody. And so if you take a position on any issue, you run the risk of angering that constituency. But who is the constituency for these outdoor brands? It's the people recreating on these lands. Like, there's very little downside. It's mostly going to be the people who don't understand the value of these lands and probably aren't going to be your consumer base. And then I think about the fact, like, when outside was in its heyday in the 90s, brands really needed outside to reach their audiences. Now,
Right.
These brands have such a direct way to talk to their consumers through social media and other channels, that we really depend on them to be, another source of good information about what's happening on these public lands. So I think it's really important that brands use their voice if they care about these places.
Absolutely. And I think that's good back to my question about like why we need a republic. I mean, it is just how people kind of consume things these days as well, right? I wrote in our outline, that, and you confirmed it by how you used to hand out stories at Outside, right? It's like, hey, we would have public land stories, and that would be how we would get a lot of information through a more generalist kind of point of view. And I think this is some of what Outside's probably learning. These are my words, not Chris's, but about what how hard that is in the modern era. That when you do have very focused topic sort of outlets, whether it is a podcast or a blog or a news outlet. So, I think that's the way people are going to consume things. It makes a lot of sense to have on the brand side. Yeah, we had Paul Hendricks on from the Conservation Alliance to talk about the branch for public lands a few months ago. It's probably time for a check-in because it does seem like there was a bit of a splash, and then it kind of has quieted down a bit on that front. I think probably tariffs took away from a lot of that conversation on the brand side, but maybe it's time to sort of start bringing that back a little bit as well. I saw an op-ed by Yvonne Chouinard not that long ago that was being very critical of California's stance on dams and taking the Newsom administration to task about things like fish. And by the way, I agree with everything Yvonne Chouinard said in that article. But this also was like, is this the time? Is this really what we want to be focused on? Like, let's not distract from what's actually happening in the world, because it's we're at a very much feels like a crossroads as a country. So I think that unified voice of like, how do we, come together is really important to do right now.
Yeah. And I think, looking back at this summer, and you're right, the Brands for Public Lands was a great example of brands using their voice. And I think it was one of the rare times that public lands issues, penetrated the national conversation. And so that you did have quite a bit of national coverage of this issue. And that was great to see. And there was a lot of rallying around, opposition to Senator Lee's proposal. There are larger threats out there right now that just aren't being talked about to that level. I look at the roadless rule, that could have just as big of an impact as some of these land sales proposals. And it's hard to tell compelling stories about policy, but
right, sure.
And that's our job as journalists, is to find the way in that is intriguing and that is going to reach somebody. But we need more entities that are really focused on that. And how do we get people's attention around these issues that are a little bit dry and not that interesting? And then it takes everybody to be doing that. But that's our challenge, Colin, is how do we make this topic compelling and interesting on a daily basis, so that people are paying attention and getting educated versus just tuning out the noise?
So can brands contribute to the nonprofit? I feel like they can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody can contribute to my nonprofit. Right now, the doors are
brands?
open.
Pony up.
I mean, I hope to get support from the brands. I mean, that's not where my area of focus for fundraising is. But I think anybody that I'm talking to that is in the outdoor industry, whether they're going to be a supporter or not, understands the need for this and why this is important, and that it can't just be advocacy groups alone that help us, make sure that these lands are protected for the long run. So, but yes, I am open to anybody who wants to support this entity.
All right. So like I said, this is out on the 12th. When will content start rolling out? Are things out on the website now?
Yeah. So if you go to the website now, you'll see my newsletter, which is also publishes articles on the site. But mostly what you're going to see is, here's what we are. This is more of a soft launch. We're announcing that, Republic is in the building phase and we are coming, and here's who we are. Here's our board of directors. I've got a great team. I've got a great team of writers who are really interested in working with us. I've got some assignments in the pipeline. There's nothing, I don't want people to be disappointed, though, when they visit now. This is not the fully realized vision for Republic. The actual content and the bigger stories that I alluded to earlier are going to start rolling out this fall. So late October, look for that.
Readers should now sign up for the newsletter, contribute if you can. Any other social media following that you want them to do? Are you going to be on all the standard platforms?
Yeah, that's going to be later this fall too. Right now, we're just promoting on LinkedIn to try to reach the business community as far and wide as possible. So I'm asking people to please sign up for our newsletter, which is, you can. It's a great way to stay informed about what's happening with public lands right now. I'm also an incredible writer, Colin, so it's going to be
I've heard. Yeah.
It's worth the free price of admission to get my newsletter. And
I remember your editor's notes. They were always very lovely, you know?
Thank you. So I think, but broadly speaking, sign up for the newsletter and please contribute. Every dollar makes a difference right now. We have essentially paid our startup costs. We have our website up and running, kind of all those expenses paid. So every dollar that comes in now is getting, plowed right into journalism. So please support us. I can't believe I'm in this position of sounding like an NPR pledge drive, but that's the world I live in now.
Coming up after the break, we're going to hear from the South African duo in whatever music.
If we can get one more caller to pledge $500, we will turn back to regular programming.
Who doesn't want a Republic shopping bag?
Tote bags are coming. Tote bags and trucker hats are coming.
Are you even a brand or a company unless you have trucker hats and tote bags? But Rockfight Army, if you're out there, follow on LinkedIn, sign up for the newsletter. Also, we are planning on having, Chris and Republic are now going to be the public lands correspondents here on the Rockfight. If there are news, we'll still have Tanya from Outdoor Alliance on occasion as well. But if there's going to be things to report, news stories happening that are going to impact public lands, and especially given Chris's background and what he's been able to do to kind of put that sort of industry bent on why it matters, why the folks listening to this podcast would want to hear about this, we're going to be featuring Chris regularly going forward as well. So, bit of a partnership.
I love it. Colin was one of the first people I talked to about this project back in April, and I'm thrilled to be finally putting it out into the world.
I lied to you and said being a founder is great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
really did.
There's no downside.
You really did. I thought I would be, sitting pretty at this point. 4 months in,
I called all the other founders
money.
afterwards. I'm like, I got another one. He's totally going to do it. No, man. Hey, listen, I appreciate you coming on to talk about it. Excited to have you back on with some regularity here to talk more about our public lands. And, good luck. We're pulling for you. I think this is great. It's exciting to get new perspectives and outdoor media, especially on something we never really had before. So really excited to see how this unfolds and develops. And we're going to be big supporters of you here for sure.
Well, awesome. And I really appreciate the chance to reach your audience and tell them what we're up to.
All right, that's the show for today. Hey, industry workers, what should the industry approach be to public lands? More engagement, less engagement? Go subscribe to Republic and then hit us up here at The Rockfight by dropping an email to myrockfight@gmail.com. The Rockfight's a production of Rockfight LLC. For my guest, Chris Keyes, I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening. And another Chris is here to take us out. Krista Makes is here, the voice of The Rockfight, and he's here to sing the Rockfight fight song. We'll see you next time, Rockfighters. Rockfight!